At Web Summit in 2016, Neo was featured on a panel that included artists Tini Tempa, Hans-Holger Albrecht, the CEO of Deezer, and Eric Walforce, the CTO of SoundCloud. On the topic of the music industry, Neo becomes particularly upset and shows his nostalgia for the olden days of music, when Spotify, Apple Music, and SoundCloud were not in existence, while the more recent performer, Tini Tempa, raves about the new innovations that come while using social media to jumpstart your career.
And that's just the reality of the world that we live in now. So it's almost like a get with the times kind of situation.
Yeah. This discussion indicates an overarching line in the sand of pop music. Some artists like streaming services, and some artists don't. Here we will discuss why new media and streaming services are both beneficial to artists and the industry itself. However, there's an ongoing fight within developers to continuously make it easier for artists to acquire the royalties they deserve. Despite the potential loss in royalties for artists, new media has actually elevated the music industry. From its birth, new media has made for a more unique, customizable music listening experience, and more than ever, companies are having to adapt to the changes in order to survive and thrive. Adapting is nothing new to record companies. Before the late 1950s, America dominated the music industry using vertical integration, a method the British would later use in the 60s and 70s. This peaked during the British invasion, and suddenly there was less room on the air for American artists. The radio is how people listened to music they wanted to buy, with the primary medium of distribution being EPs and LPs. These would later be triumphed by the long-playing cassette. The television, however, was still a relatively new invention, and record companies still weren't sure how to advertise artists' music to audiences. Film director Richard Lester started it off in the mid-1960s with a multitude of Beatles movies and promotional videos. However, there's no doubt that the transformation reached its peak with the launch of MTV in 1980.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
The marriage of video and music was the perfect way to reach teens, as they were the main demographic buying music at the time, this being the age of cassette tapes. Many artists felt like they had to make a video for their latest single, but really saw them as shallow and fake.
Music. I'm not an actor, and I'm not a dancer, and I'm not trying to sell my face.
I had a tough time doing it. I really did.
Older, established artists who embraced the video attracted new fans in the 80s.
It quickly became, if you didn't, you're going to get left behind. The boat is leaving.
But it wasn't only a marketing strategy. It was a form of artistic expression that could be analyzed, scrutinized, and watched over and over like any other film. Take, for example, the music video for Thriller, which premiered on MTV in 1983. This was a 13-minute long video, 6 minutes of which actually featured the song, that had narrative protagonists, romance, and horror. Videos like these were now the norm, and platforms like YouTube and Vevo allow the audience to watch the video as many times as they want, accumulating views by which the artists and the record companies are able to make money. Beyoncé, in 2016, made an experimental visual album titled Lemonade, a tactic used in the late 60s and 70s by many artists and groups. Other artists who have expressed their art in video are Kendrick Lamar and Jay-Z. The rise of the internet age gave birth to the rise of music piracy. The development of Napster in 1999 created an epidemic in the music industry, and the outrage of many artists was made painfully clear. But the launch of iTunes in 2003 combated piracy and resulted in its gradual decline. And thus, music is married with new media. In relation to Manovich's principles of new media, iTunes is undoubtedly modular. You have a list of songs that come together to form libraries and playlists. Variability is apparent as well, in that users are able to customize playlists to fit individual preference. The algorithms used to personalize a person's library is echoed in later years with other platforms. Pandora and Rhapsody were the brave souls that began the concept of the personalized radio. Pandora, however, turned out to be extremely unprofitable, with more users listening to music for free than actually committing to the full subscription. So time goes by, the economy tanks and bounces back, and what emerges is something that will change the way people listen to music for years to come. A streaming service called Spotify launched in 2011 to initial success, with many active users paying for the subscription. The issue, however, came when artists realized that the amount of listens on their songs didn't reflect in their royalty checks. Musicians like Radiohead and Taylor Swift have actually removed some of their songs off the website in the past. Many experts predict a growth in revenue in the years to come.
I think to your point, the industry is now growing again, right? So revenue-wise, we've been kind of like on a slide from the peak in sort of 2000 down to basically last year. And then last year, things started growing. And then forward going, if you project out the next 10 years, I mean, I just saw a graph kind of like the other day where the growth is going to be mostly driven by streaming, and we're going to go back to essentially the same levels at the peak, and then probably it's going to continue beyond that.
Cut to 2014 and the birth of Apple Music, formerly known as Beats Music, where the concept of personalization is really established. In an article written by writer Andrew Evron, he explains Apple's main point was to provide a more human touch that couldn't be matched by algorithms or competitors. It's now one of the largest streaming services in the world. Currently, hundreds of millions are using streaming services to listen to music today. As a result, the sale of the tangible album has plummeted in the last few years, from 785 million in 2000 to 241 million in 2015. Meanwhile, streaming service subscriptions have doubled in the last year, with an 11.5% gain totaling $7.7 billion. So what do we see for the future of music? First and foremost, a level playing field. For artists like Tinie Tempah, social media is the means by which they acquire their main audience. Chance the Rapper rose to new heights through the internet and even won a Grammy in 2017, all without the help of a record label. Websites like YouTube and SoundCloud have launched an abundance of artists into stardom. Speaking of SoundCloud, we might also see a slow demise of weaker platforms. Currently, SoundCloud is headed for acquisition. Meanwhile, Spotify has 140 million active users, 50 million of which are paying customers, and Apple Music has 27 million paid subscribers of their own. So getting back to Tinie's argument, maybe it's time for artists like Neo to get with the times and start taking advantage of new media.